The contemporary art scene has always been accused of being self-referential and a radical chic microcosm, which is very much disconnected from the wider audience. What do you think about it?
I think it's completely wrong. I think the contemporary art world has always been, my favorite world, and I think in a way, I remember when I started in the late 80s, early 90s, I had just done my kitchen show, and I went to Hamburg and met the young Carsten Höller. And Carsten had just started to actually work as an artist, or to sort of shift, one could say, from science. He studied and had actually started already to teach science, and somehow started to shift from science into art. And I have been in the art world already for many years, because before starting to do my first exhibition in the kitchen and monastery and in the Nietzsche house in Sils Maria, I somehow was in this grand tour for many years and traveled in the art world and made research. And so I was wondering if maybe the art world is too narrow, and if I had to go into some other worlds to have a more expanded notion of curating. And I remember very well Carsten told me in this conversation that he really believes that we should stay in the art world, because the art world has this immense possibility of bringing all the other worlds together with art and create this dialogue. And I think he was right, and I'm very happy to have followed his advice, and stayed in the art world, whilst always connecting the art world daily. My great passion, to connect the art world to all these other worlds and other disciplines. And I think the curator's role, as Seemann always told me, the curator is a generalist, and I think in a way the curator's role is to build many bridges. It's not only to build a highway, or it's not only to build one big bridge which connects the exhibition to the visitors and where you have crowds coming to exhibitions. That's all part of it, but it's very much more complex than that. It's this idea of the passerelle, the pedestrian bridge. There are many, many, many smaller bridges the curator builds to many, many, many different visitors, to many, many different communities, to all communities. That's the idea, connecting all these worlds. I think in a way it has also to do with the format of the exhibition. That's actually what I wanted to add here. Because your question, Tiziana, about the artwork being self-referential and closed, I think the format of the exhibition is extraordinarily open. Even with these limits, that it sometimes lacks connection, and as Margaret Mead says, and as Dorothea von Hartmann, we need to create more connection. Even within these limits, the exhibition format is an extraordinarily liberal format, and it's a format which allows much more than any other, basically, format to really be flexible and to kind of work with all kinds of different times and spaces. And I think this idea that we can, with exhibitions, have a film which lasts a minute, or we can have a film which lasts a year, is of course very, very different from the logic of the film world, where for a film, in order to enter a competition in a big film festival, it needs to be more or less 90 minutes. There is a very strict, as a prescription. And I think in the format of the exhibition, we are very, very free to work with time and space, and I think that's also why and also to distort time and space. And that's, I think, why so many filmmakers, theater directors, architects, scientists, more and more coming to the format of the exhibition. It started already with Jean-François Lyotard, the French philosopher, who, after having written many books, decided with Les Immatériaux, this very influential exhibition, which I studied a lot, which happened in the 1980s at the Centre Georges Pompidou. Lyotard decided to devote many, many months of his work to something which went beyond the book, and that's something Deleuze, even without, Deleuze, I always would have wished to do an exhibition with Deleuze and have him. It's my big unrealized project, is to get Deleuze to curate an exhibition. I was unfortunately too late, and he was very ill when I wanted to propose this to him, so it didn't happen. But this idea of Deleuze curate an exhibition which would go from Mille Plateaux with Guattari into space would be very fascinating. So I think a lot of philosophers, from Lyotard to more recently Bruno Latour, we brought Bruno Latour into the world of exhibition through Laboratorium with the Theatre of Proof. He enjoyed the experience so much that he then continued to curate shows with Peter Weibel, the Iconoclash, the Parliament of Things. The same thing is true for filmmakers. We brought Agnes Varda into Utopia Station with Molly Nesbitt and Ricky Tiravanija. And I remember always the day when Agnes Varda arrived in Venice disguised as a potato, doing a performance in her Patat Utopia installation, connecting Utopia Station to a potato Utopia, connecting it to agriculture, to food, having these huge quantity of potatoes in the space, having her multiple screen projection. And she told me this is an experiment she could not make in the cinema world, where there are cinemas, there are festivals, it's much more prescribed. So she said that's really what she wanted to explore more. And ever since this experience, Agnes has spent a lot of time in the world of exhibitions. And it's true for many filmmakers, it's true for many architects as well. I think this idea also of the temporary, the idea of the limited lifespan of the exhibition, the temporary experiment, allows architects often to do experiments they could never do in a sort of a more permanent setup. And so I really do, I do believe that that it's the opposite.